And welcome back to Jade's Tabletop Tavern. My name's Jade, and you are currently watching Gatekeepers. Tonight, we're going to be going over creative origin and nostalgia. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel and the channels linked in the video description below. If you would like to pose a question and join our Discord, the link to that will also be in the description below. So, without further ado, let me bring on the panel. Hello. Tonight we have with us Shadow from Shadow and Sun. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing excellent, sir. And yourself?
I'm doing all right. And looks like I'm going to have to, Max just hit me on grammar. I'm going to have to fix that. Let's bring on Conall the Cigar DM. Welcome. How are you doing, sir?
I can't help but to think it's hammer time with that shirt that Shadow has on.
Yes, it is.
Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but that show did not make me feel like I want big damn heroes, but there was another show featuring that guy that did.
Well, it depends on how you look at things. If you think the status is quo, then yeah. But if you don't, then, you know.
I mean, I'm not one to drop the hammer on anything.
A man's got to do what a man's got to do.
Yep.
Yes, singing and prancing around is definitely something no man should ever do.
Hello, Bo. How you doing? Good to have you in the
Hey,
chat.
Bo, long time no see, man. Is it Friday yet?
Legion of Myth. Yes, I also like the thumbnail better. Thank you for providing that. And
Oh,
we
hey,
also have...
is that... I'm sorry. If that's Max from Legion of Myth, yes, I will be able to show up early Friday evening to talk about that thing just for a short time, and then I've got a game. If that works with you, just let me know, because it's something I'm pretty passionate about.
Okay. And we also have the Crafting Gamer currently in chat. Welcome.
PCG, what's happening, bro?
So, are we ready to talk about, well, what got us started in this hobby and how we, can use our creative origin, wherever it might be, take us, or wherever it might have led us from?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So I think I need to kind of define what creative origin is for those of you who may not think of this term or have used this term. So let me define this. Creative origin is the first thing or group of things that inspired creativity within you to either make a story, a character, art, campaign, whatever the case might be. That is your creative origin. In a lot of ways, it's the thing you draw inspiration from. So I find myself often running to video games or to, some of my favorite Jules Verne novels or even H.G. Wells. So those are my creative origins, and I typically go and mine those for resources and draw upon them when I'm making a campaign. So,
thanks, Max.
With that being said, so I'm going to invite you two, and you in the chat in the audience, to take a moment and think back to your beginnings within the hobby, like where you started at, and I want you to think about what fed that first spark of imagination, and in your words, why did it inspire you so greatly? So, Shadow, I'm going to throw this to you first. What was your first spark of imagination in the hobby?
That's really easy. 1977.
Okay.
That was a phenomenal year of all of the things that I loved, all coalescing into one perfect year. Comic books, movies, Heavy Metal magazine, The Hobbit cartoon, action figures, I was 10 years old, and it was just a massive year. You had John Carter, Warlord of Mars. You had Conan. You had Jonah Hex. We had, like I said, Heavy Metal Magazine's first issue. Mind you, I wasn't supposed to be reading it, but it was right there next to the comic book. And most of the times I bought comic books were at a liquor store, so they didn't give a crap. As long as I wasn't, at the other rack, if you know what I'm saying, they didn't really mind. We had Star Wars, we had Micronauts, we had just so many things. Like I said, Conan, I think the first issue of Conan was 1977. First issue of John Carter, Warlord of Mars, in comic form. Those were all things I could, get my hands on at it was like 25 cents or something like that. I could take part of my lunch money and come home with a handful of comic books. And then we had the theaters. We had Planet of the Apes. I don't know if it was in the theaters, but I know it was on, some of them were on TV. That was the same year I discovered that, which was a huge influence because it showed me that these big things could continue on. It wasn't just like a one and done. Obviously, comic books were the same way, but on the big screen, going from Planet of the Apes to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, etc., showed me that stories could continue. And as a little kid, with my friends, we would play make believe, and we would draw from all these things. Just as I watched my son doing it years ago with his friends, playing make believe in the backyard, and he was, directing the play, as if he was a dungeon master for a LARP, campaign in the backyard that would continue day after day after day. We did the same thing in real life. And then a couple short years later, I got my first Dungeons and Dragons experience, and then it just all came together. I could use all of it. And it wasn't just Dungeons and Dragons, because within a year of that, I discovered Gamma World, Top Secret, Boot Hill, Star Frontier, maybe not Star Frontiers, Traveler, all of these things that we could make stories and instead of running around in the backyard, because we were too big for that, we could sit around a table and do the same thing over and over with these same characters, continuing, getting better, moving the story along, and just pulling from this vast wealth of literature. Mind you, I had read things like Sherlock Holmes and Doc Savage and Perry Rodin and The Shadow, obviously. Prior to 77, I was reading all these cool books, but not knowing what to do with them other than, wait for the next, Friday or Saturday when we'd go to Gemco. Probably nobody here remembers Gemco, and go there. And I get I get one book at the end of the shopping trip as we were leaving was the record and book section, which was weird. But right at as you were leaving, there were those two sections, and I hadn't really discovered music, then, other than comedic albums like Steve Martin and Richard Pryor. But I could go into the book section, and my folks were like, "You can pick out one book, cool." And if I was lucky, it would be a continuation of the Doc Savage series or Perry Rodin or some of the other books. And I hadn't yet discovered fantasy other than a little bit with Doc Savage, kind of, but not really, or Tarzan. But it wasn't until 77 that I discovered The Hobbit. The you remember Gemco? Greatest hamburgers ever in their snack bar. But when the Hobbit cartoon came out on TV, I'm like, what is this? This dwarves and hobbits and elves and a dragon and all this stuff. And then, of course, that led me to Robin Hood, King Arthur, and things like that. My parents thought, "Oh, you like this crap? Okay, well, why don't you read the good stuff?" Because while my mom had read The Hobbit, that was as far as she got, and that was a college thing. They weren't really, fantasy minded. Science fiction, they could not just tolerate, but they could understand, because that was a big thing. They had gone through 2001: Space Odyssey and other sci-fi of that era before I got to see it. Reminds me, Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out in 77, which tied into my interest of UFOs from the Travis Walton experience, and I'd seen Close Encounters and that sparked my interest on UFOs, which is, lasted, as you guys may well know, on Saturday nights I do the paranormal show with the quantum show with Nathan Allen, and it was just that whole year was just a magical year. If I had a time machine, I that you're killing me, Max.
No, he's asking you
Man.
to kill the dog.
No, he was asking you to kill the intruder so the dog can eat.
Yeah.
Oh,
The intruder is a leaf blowing by my house, probably. If I had a time machine, I would go back to 1977 and just watch all the kids go nuts, because it was a phenomenal year. Unlike
Man,
any year,
if I could be any more jealous of a year.
right.
yeah, it had it all.
Okay.
They say the 80s were great. The 80s were great if you were a certain age, but the 70s were better if you were younger. Just saying.
Fair enough. All right, Conall. So to you, what fed your first spark of imagination?
Peter Pan.
Oh, okay. Going a little old school.
I grew up in, as most of you guys knows, I didn't grow up here in the States. I grew up overseas with my grandparents, and my grandma would always read at least twice a year Peter Pan. And the idea of Neverland was always the frontier of my mind when I think of, make believe land, because it had all the cool things: mermaids, pirates, boys and girls that never grew up. It really was an ideal place in theory to be, a kid. And book is so much different than the movies, all the movies except for the Robin Williams ones. That was a good movie, but that's besides the point.
There's a classic. That's the ultimate dad movie, as a matter of fact.
Fuck.
Yeah, we might have to do that on Sunday at some point. But no, it's Peter Pan. Then at the same time, with my grandma being who she was, there was also a lot of Eastern European folklore that went into that. Like somewhat of the story I told on Table Breakers, the Christmas special. Now, I know that wasn't exactly Shadow's favorite per se, but it was stories like that I grew up on. And now I didn't get into it. It is commonly known that I did not get into the hobby as young as you guys did. It was high school time. I got into, like, hell, you met me at the first table I was ever really at.
Yeah, that was 2006.
So I was already in my 20s at that juncture. So, but, where I get my ideas for my imagination for stories I tell, go back to, like Shadow said, it might not be 1977, but growing up with the grandparents I had, there was a lot of good source for imagination ideas. I mean, coming from the land of the wee people, and with all the Romani mythology go with it, vampires, werewolves, and leprechauns, oh my. So mine's not as long-winded as, like, say, other people, but that's my answer.
That's still a good answer, Tom.
1980s Dune. Okay.
So,
80s were fun too. Don't get me wrong. It was just,
I also watched, as Craft and Gamer said, 1980s Dune. I thought it was fantastic. Well, I like the book more, but for one of the first adaptations that I watched of a book to a movie, I thought it was actually fairly okay especially for its time.
Literature was big in my household. Literature was very big. Now, don't read Dante's Inferno, then read Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory. At the end, it feels like you've read the same book twice.
So for me, my creative origin, I kind of said at the beginning, it's Jules Verne, it's H.G. Wells, but it's also Chrono Trigger by Square, at the time, Square Enix, at the time it was just Square and Squaresoft. And my creative origin there is the phenomenal storytelling within Chrono Trigger, as well as the theming, the pacing, and the fact that it was my first real foray into a time traveling game where I got to control characters and not just watch a movie or read a book about time travel. The thing that sparks my imagination the most is messing with temporal flow. It's the time travel aspect. Going back to the distant past, what was it like? Going forward, into the far-flung future, like what is possible? You want to meet your heroes that have been dead for 1,000 years. Hop in the time machine and go. So, like, my creative origin is very much time related, but it's also more around the Victorian steampunk era of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. And then, like I said, the game, the Chrono Trigger, the video game, just it pulled me in such a way and held me in such, a point of suspense that I'm like, what's going to happen next? Now, I've played the game, I don't know how many times at this point. I can't tell you how many times I've played the game. I know I've seen every single one of the 13 or 15 endings to it. Multitudes of times. Because I just love that game so much. And in my own words, like, what is it about it that inspires me so greatly is that, it to me, it's a timeless classic, but it's the ability to tell a complete story broken up over multiple eras of existence. It's the ability to be brief in what you are telling, but tell it in such a way that you can really grasp another person's attention and hold it. I think that was one of the things that Chrono Trigger did well. And then that's what I try to emulate in my own games, is that sense of brevity, but sense of grandness to the story, the grandness to the world and to the the expanse that there is. So, for me, it's very much like, be brief, but tell a huge story is my, in my words, what inspires me so greatly about Chrono Trigger. That's going to bring us to, we're getting some people in the chat here. Welcome, Plady. I saw that you entered here. Crafting Gamer, of course, I put this one on screen earlier. First imagination was Dune. Love Dune. Lady, total boredom in sub school. Okay. Dude showed me riffs and it was off to the races. Yes, the temporal prime directive. It's more of a suggestion than a directive. We all know this. It's a laundry room for Friday night. Okay. Catherine Kerr. I don't think I've read Catherine Kerr. And I will be glad to borrow those books when I sit down at your table on the 6th, Scott.
Ooh.
Yep. It was the gummy bears. Okay, Colonel Crunk, I'm gonna have to hear. Like, you're gonna have to tell me a little bit more. Like,
the Disney gummy bears from the early '90s.
Like, I know that YouTube has a 120 character limit for comments, but I'm interested now. Like, I'm kind of curious.
Gummy bears. I remember that. Yeah, yeah, it's the early '90s Disney gummy bears.
Of course, Tolkien is a lot of people's inspiration, especially for, in pertaining to the hobby, and fantasy. So, all right. So this kind of leads into the next one. What effect or influence did your creative origin have on your very first campaign, character, or otherwise? So, tell me about the themes, the character, the storytelling, or quests, whatever the case might be. Conall, I'm going to shoot this one down to you first.
Well, I've actually never tried to play anything from Never Neverland in a campaign for reasons other than ew. But for original origins or origin sparks, I do take from books I read. As you know, I am a huge Dresden's fan. Dresden.
Mhm.
So the way he treats like the Winter Lady
Okay.
is the way I describe her in my campaigns, or being a fairy named Toot, or whatever else I can take from there that it's not from. Yeah, right here. Wait, hold on. Let me flip it up correctly. This book right here. This is a book that started all my issues. Jim Butcher's Stormfront. And if I would have had this back when I very first started gaming, it would have been a whole completely different story where I'm at now. But there's enough in this world that he has created that I can use in my campaigns. Imagine a campaign that said way back for the original Merlin, him doing a campaign where he putting the original council together, the White Council together, and it sparks like that. And not exactly a word from page into a campaign, but it's things from that world that he's created I can use as ideas for my own campaign. That's not completely, still on page for not. Oh yeah, no, I run a campaign, Scott, for all women, and it's basically weekly Xena episodes, and I do not have a problem with that. But
Apparently they don't either.
they've never seen Xena.
Oh, okay. That helps.
So it's a win. But yeah, I will use things from books I read. Literature is the best source for any material for gaming, in my humble opinion. Video games are great. Movies are wonderful. But realistically, at the end of the day, it's books, because books don't tell you what something is supposed to look like. It leaves it up to your imagination. So when you sit down to run a campaign, there are certain aspects that doesn't have to be white, brown, yellow, purple, whatever. It can be whatever you describe it to be.
Fair enough. So, Shadow, what effect or influences did your creative origin have on your first campaign, character, or otherwise?
Well, my first character in the first game I played was an absolute disaster. I've told you guys about the invisible hobgoblins or bugbears, excuse me, being able to see us because we were invisible also. Since we were all invisible, we could see each other, and that was just god awful. Total party kill. And all of my previous experience of movies and comic books and books led me to believe that this should be better than what I had experienced. It was so god awful that I went out, even though it was my first game, I went out and mowed extra lawns over the course of the next 2 weeks to be able to afford my first player's handbook, so that I could see, one, it says player's handbook on it, and why can't we look in it? Because the DM says we can't look at it. I'm like, but it says, no, you can't look. What do you mean? It says player's handbook. Oh, it's only for the DM. Well, then why does it say player's handbook on it? And the other book says Dungeon Master's Guide. And I got that, and they're like, okay, fine. You can look at it. It's your book. Obviously. And but because of the attitude of the DM, it inspired me to go out and buy the Dungeon Master's Guide in almost half the time, but it was about 50% more expensive. So I was doing extra chores, mowing lawns, cutting trees, whatever I could do to come up with I think it was $15 at the time, as a 13, 14-year-old kid. I was 12 or 13. What?
15, 16 bucks? Can we go back to those prices?
It's comparable. It's comparable to today's market.
Yeah.
Raised by 15%?
Although, I don't know, though, because now if I were to mow a lawn, it's like $25 front, $25 back. That would take me an hour. And back in the day, it would take me, every spare moment of after-school activity I could wrangle up, as well as two or three lawns on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, getting like $250 a pop. So yeah, I'd rather just mow 2 lawns than 20 to get a DMG.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, there isn't a DMG out there that I'm looking for, so I'm good. But and from that point, I went and when I came back to the group with a Dungeon Master's Guide in my backpack, they're like, "Fine, you're Dungeon Mastering," and I'm like, "Well, okay, next week I'll DM." And from there on out, it was, it was history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a math guy, Max. I'm not a math guy. And I might have spent, some of that money on a Pepsi here and there, so.
So that's what we're calling it, Pepsi?
I was 12 or 13, not 15.
Yeah, we saw what you were like in that movie, falling out back of the van. Don't lie to the people in chat.
That was more like 17. David Brand for Sci-Fi. I am not familiar with that name, but there's a lot of authors I'm not familiar with. But yeah, it was a crappy experience based on the expectation of all of the things I had loved and thought should, be part and parcel of the DMG. Lo and behold, when I finally got to the end and read all of the books and the appendixes that were recommended to read, things like Elric and The Hobbit, Amber and Conan and Narnia and all those other things. Oh, okay. Thanks, Matt. My math is still crap, and yet my family has me do the math. But yeah, I was just expecting more, and so I wanted to create more.
Okay. So the way that Wells and Wells, Vern, and Chrono Trigger influenced my very first campaign was I, like Max said earlier in this evening. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. So I, like Max said earlier in the evening, I thought I could tell maybe a better story of time travel like Chrono Trigger. I couldn't. I'm just going to leave that out there. I couldn't tell a better story. And there were concepts that I didn't quite understand as a game master at that time. Because I think I was like maybe... God, I can't even remember how old I was in the first campaign I tried to run. Either way, it didn't work out. But, I learned. And, but that was my first foray, and that, I thought I could do something with a story that already kind of existed and just tweak things here and change things there, maybe switch up the monsters or switch up, the order of things. And I thought I was doing fairly well. My players told me otherwise in not so kind of terms, but I digress. So my first character that I tried to play was actually a pirate character. And my first character that I tried to play was a ranger, because I had just read Lord of the Rings, Fellowship, and Two Towers. I just finished both of them, and I wanted to run a ranger. I wanted to play an Aragorn-like character, because that was, to me, like, that was just the pinnacle of what it meant to be a wilderness warrior. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be like that character. I want to play that character. And when I was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons as a player, instead of not as the game master, but as a player, like I said, I just read Tolkien, and I was basically told, I was asked, hey, what kind of character do you want to play? I'm like, well, what can I play? Like, what is possible? What is available? And they're like, well, what's your favorite book? And when I told them I just read Tolkien, Fellowship and Two Towers, like, oh, well, you could play any one of the characters from that in this, and we can show you how to build it. And I'm like, yes, I want to do that. I want to be able to make the characters I just read about in a book, but I want to make them my own. And that was really the start for me as a player, conceptualizing the different characters I come across in all the different books I've read and all of the different movies and video games I've played. I can sit there and look and watch and read about these characters, and I can break them down based on what they're capable of doing and put them into just about any game. And for a while there, Conall and I would often argue back and forth, like, hey, would this person have this ability or would they have this ability, like this feat or that feat? And we would actually, theorize and discuss like what these characters had in terms of D&D, specifically in 3.5, because that's what we were playing at the time.
I miss those days.
Yeah, like, but that inspiration, spurs even more creative play. Like, okay, how would I do this? How long would it take me to get up to that point? Like, at what level are they in this story that we're watching, or this game that we're playing? Like, what level are they?
How would you build Spider-Man? Was one of the topics.
Spider-Man's a monk. Yeah, he's a monk.
I say a wizard.
Well, I digress. That's a topic for a different discussion.
That's to the point. I mean,
it is kind of to the point, yeah.
Anyway,
but especially if you ever played Villains and Vigilantes. Oh my God, we had those conversations all freaking day long, or Champions, or whatever superhero game you played, as long as it wasn't Superhero 2044. I wish I still had that game. It's literally the first superhero game ever, and goes for a couple $100, and I sold mine for $10.
Ouch.
So many years ago.
Do you remember your first character? Was Aragon your first character?
Who, me?
Yeah.
So his name was Garrick Nilo. I had picked just a trash human name, and then I saw in the player's handbook for 3.5 that Nilo was like Elven for something. I can't remember. So that's what I went with, was Garrick Nilo, and he was a half elf ranger. And he was kind of based on Aragorn to an extent.
That was, my first character was a ranger as well in that AD&D game, so I totally get that. I mean, what else? What's wrong with freaking Hobbit?
Right? But I mean, and that was, that was the cool inspiration there. It was like, I can build these characters in D&D and play them, and I can have these grand adventures with these characters, and I already have, like, in my mind's eye not just what it looks like, but what it would sound like, what it would, because Tolkien can spend paragraphs describing a single blade of grass, and you get a vivid image of what that is. And having just read it, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see these characters going on these kinds of adventures. This is phenomenal. I want more of this. And 25 years later.
What about you, Shadow?
So,
can you remember your first character?
It was a ranger, and this is how young I was. I literally just named him Aragorn, but Aragorn like the fourth. He was the son of the but I was 12 years old, and so yeah.
I remember mine. It was a tiefling rogue fighter, who was more lucky than he was good. How many times did I die in that campaign and came back? One too many times.
2, 3, 4 too many times?
Yeah.
The DM was very generous.
Well, there was a dice roll. He had me roll D10s.
Yep.
I pulled off the hat track, then eventually it just didn't work.
Nice.
Anyways, I thought that question was, valid to the topic of tonight.
Yeah, it was. So, so let's think back about our creative origin, our whatever first inspired us, and how often do you go back to revisit or rewatch, reread that item, that thing that first inspired you? How often do you spend the time to go back and review that? Shadow, I'm going to start with you.
Well, 1977 was a big year, so it's a lot to try. But because this is, excuse me, guys, April, and I'm doing a Western month. I'm dying here, folks. It's super hot up here. Yeah, I know, and I smoke too much. I actually started picking up all of the Jonah Hex comic books earlier this month to try to get back. Yeah, I know. I'm even gonna probably buy the movie, even though the female lead is not impressed with her from what I saw from the trailers. But that's one aspect. I have so many aspects. Whatever mood I'm in, I can just go back to 1977 and just randomly stab at an item, and I'll pick a winner. There's literally thousands of things to choose from. So for me, it's a big freaking spectrum of phenomenal things.
When you do go back and revisit one of those things from 1977, does it still have an impact on you to this day, like when you re-experience it?
I'll let you know when I get to Jonah Hex's in, but normally I would say yes. But I like to look at it, twofold, through the eyes of that 10-year-old kid or 14-year-old kid. But I also like to see it and try to picture the era it was written, not just when like John Carter. I discovered it in 77, but when I read it, it was written in 1912, and I try to appreciate what what went through the author's mind when he was writing this. I mean, they're just rolling out of the wild west, and here's this guy talking about Mars and airships and things like that, as well as how I can use it or how it still holds up to today's standards and values and expectations. A lot of people, if they were to read, for example, John Carter today, they might be like, oh, it's dated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's what makes it great, is that it is a virtual time machine to not just 1912 and Edgar Rice Burroughs' frame of mind and the world around them and how they must have reacted to a story like that in Weird Tales or wherever it might have first appeared, but how well it can translate to today compared to a lot of the junk that's coming out. A lot of the things that we see just don't have that originality, or they just have some other things. I'm not going to go into like politics or anything like that, but just certain they take certain things for granted, whether it's the language and the way that people speak, or that for example, like the interactions between men and women. Up until recently, they had been the same throughout history, and recently they've changed. And looking back, when I see too much of modern day isms put into what's supposed to be a fictional fantasy story or something in the past, it just doesn't come off authentic to me. They're trying to make it modern, but it's the Wild West. There weren't a lot of lady gunslingers back then, or a lot of lady pirates, or things like that. Yeah, that's
singular there.
That's your thing, Max.
So, because it still has an impact on you to this day, what can pick one of those things, and what impact does it have after you rediscover it or go through it again? What impact does it have on your game or your character building whenever you go back and let's say, for example, you went back to one of the Mad magazines recently, and what impact does that have on how you approach the hobby?
That's a good one, because I didn't mention that, but I did get every single Mad magazine, and what I loved the most was, I don't know if you guys remember, they used to have Mad magazine, and inside it would be one of those color comic books that was a reprint from the original days of Mad magazine.
Yep.
Back when people actually had a sense of humor, could take a joke. and you could make fun of your friends, and they wouldn't get, sign
Shade.
you off out of their book of friends and put you into the book of grudges, for what back then would just be simple ribbing or good natured teasing, which we need to bring that back. His sense of humor is crucial, and people could make fun of each other and not declared a hostile work environment or racism or something like that. You could just cut loose with a joke. Sometimes all it takes is for you to actually look the person in the face when they're giving you a hard time, and you can see up here in these things that they don't mean any malice. They're just they got one of these things, it's called a smile, and a little twinkle in their eye. They're not growling at you, they're not balling up their fists, they're just messing with you because you're their friend, and we need to bring that back. Oh my God, do we need to bring that back?
Okay. So
You disagree, Conall?
No, I don't disagree. I just remember the days where mine and Jay's normal greeting to each other was, "Hey, schmuck."
Hey, putz.
You never lose that. Never lose that. Never.
Well, we always joked that we were like Walter and what was his name, Max in Grumpy Old Men. Like just our typical banter back and forth was like that in day to day.
I was thinking the Odd Couple, but that worked too.
Same people.
Same I think it was the same people actually. So Conall, to you, how often do you go back to your first points of inspiration to revisit what inspired you so profoundly? And does it still have an impact on you after you get done, revisiting it?
I'm such a nerd. I am such a nerd, but
aren't we all?
In the best ways.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, sweet. I have a daughter who, when she was younger, I'd read her Peter Pan. I read her a lot of the same books to a certain degree that my grandma read to me. I don't think there are certain grim fairy tales I don't think you should read to like a 5-year-old, but that's just me. Cinderella did not have a good ending. I'm sorry. Neither did my Little Mermaid and a few others. Yeah, not
Snow
exactly.
White. Yeah.
But I do, there for a time when she's not allowing me, but when she had time for me, because kids do grow up, I would read her such stories, and it took me back to the time that I spent with my grandparents. I can't pick up comic books was also a very big. I've always been a big comic book person. I had problems reading when I was younger. My grandpa's solution to that is like, well, he likes to read, but he has issues, so let's meet him in the middle. And threw comic books at me, one comic book after the other. And I can't pick up like a Green Lantern comic without the oath running through my head, and Darkest Night and no evil. So my nerdness will like flare off. And if I'm trying to make a character for somebody's campaign, I'm like, do I want to make it Dresden-ish? Not play Harry Dresden from the book, but a type of character you'd find in his world. I would go back to this book. I about done with changes right now, and this will be my 5th time running through it. Just for ideas for characters I want to build, because that world, once again, is so rich with ideas that you're not stealing somebody's IP to a certain degree. You're just
borrowing,
goosing your own imagination into directions you normally wouldn't think of.
Okay. For me, I have owned every printed physical copy of Chrono Trigger that Square has put out. The SNES cartridge, the PS1 edition, the I think DS version. I've owned every single copy there is of Chrono Trigger. That's how much of a impact it had on me as a young person when it came out in 1996. So for me, I like to revisit that game often. I play through it. Yes, I know the story. Yes, I know all the mechanics. Yes, I know all the patterns to every monster I'm going to fight. I know I can swiftly defeat, the final boss, way before I need to, or way before I'm supposed to. Like, I know that game inside and out. But to me, it's still exceptionally fun to play through. That's why I keep saying it is within my top 3 all-time RPG games I've ever played. It will likely always be among the top 3. If not the top 1, then definitely the top 3. And every time I play it, there's another nugget that I will pick up on and go, hey, what if I was to include this into my current campaign and, maybe put this spin onto it instead. I'm working on my prehistory game, my Bronze Era game, and I talk with other people in the hobby, specifically on Discord or in different forums and whatnot. And one of the other creators out there and I have been chatting, and he was looking for inspiration on how to use like a bioluminescent culture, like a people or a culture that has this bioluminescence to their skin under certain phases of the moon. I'm like, hey, that's a really cool idea. Do you mind if I borrow that or steal that idea for something I'm working on? It's like, yeah, no, go for it. Because he was apparently, I have not seen all of Avatar. And I don't mean Last Airbender. I have seen Last Airbender. Whatever the James Cameron? I have not seen that entire film. Every time I try to watch that film, within the first 20 minutes, I'm either looking for something else to do, like I'm bored out of my mind, or I'm asleep. It just cannot hold my interest. I don't know what's wrong with me. Everyone else says amazing things about this film, and I'm just like,
not everyone.
I don't get it.
If I really want to watch that movie, I'll watch Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves. Same story.
Okay, or as I've heard, Fern Gully, but
hey, Fern Gully has
either way, so that's where this person's idea originally came from, was to use the bioluminescence of the of the patterns that show up on the people native to whatever the world is. I think it's Pandora, right?
I think so.
Like I said, I know little bits and pieces about the film. Either way, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use that bioluminescent idea because I think that's awesome, but I'm going to put it in my Sky Peoples race. So when my players, if more so than when my players discover the Sky People in my prehistory world, the noble class, the high class or highborn class among them are going to bioluminesce. And I'm using the original concept of the flying city that I discovered in Chrono Trigger. I'm using the same setup that I've always used in the game world that I've made. And so I like I said, I go back to my creative origin. I'm like, what stood out about these people? Their skin was lighter colored than everyone else's. Their hair was damn near silver, if not slightly bluish, almost like they glowed in daylight and at night. You know what? I'm going to use that. And so I'm writing it into my prehistory game. So, like I said, going back to revisit your creative origin, the thing that first inspired you, mine it, revisit it in full and, complete it. And then see if there's something in there that you hadn't thought about in a very long time or hadn't thought about in a certain light, and see about putting a twist on it to see if it's something you can use again, and nobody would be the wiser. I'm going to get to chat here real quick. There's been a lot of activity, and I thank you, chat, for being so active.
If I'm remembering
Flake says,
correctly, you're
Robin Hobb, the Assassin's Trilogy was awesome. Okay.
if I'm remembering
Let's
correctly,
see.
your blue people were kind of assholish.
Say again?
If I'm remembering correctly, your sky people are kind of assholes.
Yes, and that was on purpose. So one of the reasons why my Sky people in my game world, especially in the later eras, the reason why they believe themselves to be superior to surface dwellers is, technologically speaking, they are. Period. There is no discussion there. When your characters are slinging steel at one another in the form of swords, they're throwing lead at each other with black powder and bullets. By the time the surface dwellers discover gunpowder, they've already moved on to the space race. They're already in space and have access to light-based or energy-based weaponry. So the reason why you experienced the sky people being superior to you was because in their mind you were tool using monkeys.
Gotcha.
So
I'm just going on. I remember that's, yeah.
So while I get through chat, I'm going to ask the next question, and I'm going to start this one with Conall here. So when you go back and re-engage with the thing that influences you so greatly, do you ever find a new facet of it to use within the hobby in some way? Now, I've already kind of covered this for me. So, Conall, when you go back and revisit, let's say, one of your comic books, say Spider-Man or even Dresden Files, is there something about it that you're just like, you know what? I can use this one little thing that would otherwise skate by unnoticed if I did this differently. Do you ever experience that?
Yeah, I have. Intent. Actually, I'll do one better. There was a book that turned into a movie series. The book was a great deal better, called Aragon. It was about a dragon and a young boy found a dragon egg out in the forest. The book series was a great deal better than the movie. Granted, the movie had Jeremy Irons, which is one of my favorite actors of all time. But by the way, Scott, that is an amazing TV series, Grimm's. But with the book, the concept was to be able to cast magic. You had to be able to speak its true name, but in a draconic. So I figured if I was running a game, and I tried this once or twice, I've had mixed results. If you want to be a spellcaster, not divine, but a sorc or wizard, you had to know what the word was in draconic. You had to speak draconic, and not everybody out there spoke draconic. You had to learn it from like a mentor, or you had to find a way to learn the word. It wasn't, here's your list, remember 5 of first 0 level spells, 1 first level spell, and off to the races you go. No, you had to find somebody who actually knew the word, who could teach you the word, because that's how magic worked in my world. Now, like I said, divine, that was a whole different subject. I didn't really touch it that one the same way. That's how I handled magic in using that book as a source of that idea, and a few others. Oh, and I made all elves vegetarians, because elves, in my opinion, are closer in nature than anything else.
Okay.
So if they're so close, if they have like a buddy that's a raccoon, why would they eat meat? It was just it was just the way I ran it.
Because their other friends eat meat.
Well, if you have a pet pig and you decide to eat it, is it still a support animal? I think so, but that's just me.
So real quick, Shadow, this one's for you.
Yeah, I saw the secondary message. Max, if you could save it for the following week, that would be incredibly generous. I have a game with Bo and Omen and some other gentlemen. That's why I wanted to be in as early as possible. I really appreciate it.
I would actually like to join that conversation because I also DM for kids as well.
You are a kid.
I mean,
everybody in this panel, by definition, is a kid by our hobby.
kid at heart.
Hey, what's the point of growing up if you can't be childish?
On occasion. All right, so Shadow, to you, when you re-engage with your creative origin, the multitude of things, because you have a lot more things than even I have to engage with from 1977. When you re-engage with any of those, do you ever find new facets that you can pull into a game or tweak just ever so slightly to put a new spin on it?
Too many to mention. Okay. I read things that are, I mine things that are 100 years old regularly, and it's you're the man back. It is literally too many to mention. The more I read, the sometimes the harder it is for even me to remember where I'm pulling things from. Was it this or was it that, or was it a whole bunch of things? Because sometimes things, especially if you, for example, start with the oldest books in your collection, how many things did that influence along the way, up until now? John Carter is accredited for influencing, many other books. As far as we know, Tolkien could have actually read, some of Burroughs' work and been influenced by that, and then that influenced D&D and on and on and on. So it's just a never-ending, endless supply of things to mine for nuggets. That's why it's such a shame that bookstores are becoming a thing of the past, because that's the ultimate source of things that we all enjoy. It's just it's a shame.
I don't know. Every time I'm in the St. Louis region, I always stop in at the half price books and Books a Million any chance I get, just to peruse their shelves.
I've been in this city for 12 years, and in the entire 12 years, there's only a B. Dalton or something like that bookstore that used books. There's no such thing here. I literally, I probably have more used books. I probably have more used books in my collection that are in the rest of the freaking city.
In Peoria, we have 2 used books, multiple libraries.
Rub it in. Just rub it in. Just keep rubbing it in.
If you don't have a bookstore in your community, 10 to 1, you might have a library. And just because you can't buy it,
no, we have a library.
Well, unless you live in states that are defunding them, but we'll leave that alone.
No, we actually do have a library, and I managed to pick up the first 6 of the Dragon Rider, the first 6 Dragon Riders of Pern, and 2 Western paperback novels for like 50 cents a pop.
Was that the first Dragon Riders with a perm?
Pern.
Of Pern.
Of Pern. I misheard that.
The white dragon. Yeah. That would be pretty funny. But I'm not going where my mind was going with that either. We're terrible.
So, well, Shadow, since you have actually the most years of experience out of the 3 of us within the hobby, can you give me can you give me 3 examples of when you've taken a nugget from one of the things that you engage with, and put a twist on it?
Oh, now you're gonna make me think hard. Okay.
Yes, I am.
3 examples.
I enjoy making people think.
I mined the hell out of Thundar the Barbarian for every Gamma World game I've ever run.
Okay.
Yeah, you would.
Who wouldn't? I mean, it's they're the same freaking thing. Literally, they should have paid TSR some money for that one. But hell, I even Let's keep that going. I also mined the hell out of the Johnny Quest for some of my other games like Boot Hill and Top Secret, as well as my superhero games. Anytime there's, if there's a jungle or a desert or mummies or lizard people, I'm definitely gonna swipe from that. And to bring it all the way to the present, or at least the last 10 or 12 years, the Venture Brothers has also slipped into many of my games because they all sort of, go along the same sort of idea with my superhero games, to the point that I am going to be running a quasi supernatural The Venture Brothers modern day sort of superhero campaign, focusing more on the magic than the actual superhero stuff. But it still will be a world of superheroes. They're just going to be in the background, kind of like, oh, they're the stars, but us, lowly magic abusers, we're in the deep kind of situation.
Venture Brothers. I am so glad I bought that series.
I wish I could get my boy to jump back into it.
God.
So I've already given my thoughts on taking something and putting a new twist on it. So this is actually the last question I have for the evening. So it's going to be kind of free form after this.
Holy shit.
So yeah, I know with just 3 people, we get through 5 questions fairly quickly. So does revisiting your creative origin ever spawn new game ideas, like new campaign ideas, or at least different ideas from when it first inspired you? Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one. Any new ideas coming to mind?
Hell yeah. My whole, I don't get me wrong. I cut my teeth on Dungeons and Dragons, and I played Dungeons and Dragons first edition as, almost as written, with adding Dragon Magazine stuff and obviously homebrew stuff here and there. But I played that for a long, long time. But all of my original, inspirations keep drawing me out of that genre and into all the other genres that growing up I never got to play. I got 2 copies of Boot Hill. One's still sealed from back in the day. Okay, but I've only run it once. I've got 6 modules, never run any of them. I've got Gamma World, like every edition. I've got Top Secret, both editions, Star Frontiers, all those games that have almost never seen the light of day. Mind you, they're still being played today in various circles around the world. They're still being emulated in a lot of fashions. This last couple of years, I've seen, a handful of Western games alone. It's literally the redheaded stepchild of all the gaming genres, but yet I've seen the Red Room do a version. I've seen the Basic Expert do a version. I've seen a D20 version. There's all these things besides fantasy, just strict, medieval European sort of fantasy games that are just like, I'm a little burnt on them. I'll continue to play them, because I don't have to run them. So it's fun to be able to be in those kinds of games. I'm in a couple right now. I'm going to be in another one that's kind of big news that I'll drop on you guys later. But I've noticed that, with this whole internet thing, because this is new to me. I've only been watching YouTube for about literally less than 3 years. And I was doing other stuff, didn't have the time for it, didn't care. And, my son, got me into watching it. And that's how we got here. And I've been able to meet a whole bunch of people that are constantly looking for a new game. And more often than not, it's not D&D. There's so many games out there that just aren't getting the love. And now for some reason, maybe it was the OGL stuff, or maybe it's just that time and everybody's in the mood for something completely different. I know a lot of people are still playing D&D. They're never going to drop from that game. They'll play it until, their eyes fall out of their head and they can't roll dice anymore. But there's a lot of people that are looking for new stuff, and that makes it so much easier to propose these other games. Hey, let's play Amazing Adventures. Let's play, Top Secret or whatever. There's so many other genres out there. And growing up, there was very little, besides, like in 77, there was also Wizards, but, Conan hadn't come around yet, on the big screen. I was reading the Conan comic books, but, Conan wasn't the same as Tolkien kind of fantasy. And, not too many people want to be in a Conan game because there's only one Conan. Lord of the Rings, there's a whole fellowship and a party. But, for me, there was more science fiction and horror and things like that than there was originally fantasy until I got a little bit older and knew how to look for those things, at the library or the comic book store. So, yeah, I'm gonna be playing a lot of games that are all gonna be, influenced by those things. Hopefully, I'll be as mature about it as possible. Obviously inside the little kid in me is going to be jumping up and down. Yeah, we finally get to play Gamma World, but outside it's like, describing the desolation and the horror and the radioactivity and the mutants and all that stuff, but the little kid in me is going to be jumping up and down.
Oh, hell. There's a, God, they're also the same people who do Skyrim. Fallout something. It's a Fallout game.
All of the Fallout games.
The Fallout games have its own RPG. If you like nuclear waste and Gamma World, there you go.
But I have Gamma World. I've got 5 different versions of Gamma World that I could all integrate with each other, as opposed to
trying to help. I'm just trying to help.
I appreciate that, but the last thing I need is another IP in my. Oh my God! I can't believe I actually said that. Of course, there's room for more IPs. Sorry,
what was it? I know that Brandon Sanderson, I think, is still in talks for getting a Stormlight Archive RPG off the ground. Don't quote me on that. I don't know where those talks are at this point, but I know there was a lot of talk about it.
What game?
It's Stormlight Archive.
Never heard of it.
Currently it's a 4-book series. They're thick novels, like 1,200 or 1,400 pages at times.
They're 18, 20 hour
you could spend hours reading them. But I digress. There's talks in place to get a RPG system based around the magic of the Stormlight Archive, the magic system there. And every time I re-listen to the Stormlight Archive, I'm like, I would run this in Exalted. Like, it would be very easy to run the Knights Radiant in Exalted. And like, you wouldn't even have to do a lot of extra like lifting or work to put the Stormlight Archive into Exalted. Like, there's a lot of charms and abilities that are already there that are similar to what is in the books. So, every time I read it, I'm like, yeah, I could make a character that's an Exalted. He's probably a Dawncast, and he probably has this charm and that charm, and he can fly. So he doesn't have like I can't use that charm unless I go to this cast. But you see the point there. Like, even though a system already exists, they're still coming up with a new system of for it specifically. I started the Stormlight talk, and apparently he's talking about Stormlight Archive on his Discord right now. The first 3 books rock. Yes, I love all 4 books. Let's hear this. Subtle literary changes in book 4. That how it should be written. Yes. And you can adopt anything into the World of Darkness set. Yes, you can. But anyway, so I'm going to throw this question down to Conall. When revisiting your creative origin, your the thing that first got you hooked, let's say Peter Pan, are there any new ideas? Anytime you like reread it or reread it to your daughter, is there any time like you thought, hey, I could run a campaign based on this idea?
Oh God, yeah, but I didn't run for her. I was rereading. I was doing a mixture of reading. God, at that time, I think Change just came out. To be completely honest, Change just came out. I'm reading her Peter Pan. We're down in Charleston, Illinois, and I'm reading the book, and I'm reading that book to her, and somehow Dresden just pops up into my head. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm running a game that's basically running the Dresden Files through Pathfinder. And I'm like, what if I made Peter Pan a kidnapper of kids?
Ooh, dark,
And
yeah.
so after they got done with Foul Moon or Full, whatever it's called, the werewolf bullshit book, because that book was crap, in my opinion. Anyways, I look at, I knew who I was running for. And I'm like, okay, so a couple of them were playing normal, like cops and so forth. And I'm like, so there has been a kidnapping. And they got their attention. And I turned basically Peter Pan into a bad guy who kidnapped kids. And Captain Hook was actually the good guy. He was trying to get the kids back to their rightful parents, but between fairy magic and everything else, he just was not having any luck with it. that's how I ran it. And I didn't get to finish that one because we had to move or whatnot. But yes, I have definitely I turned the story of Peter Pan on its ear and ran it for a campaign setting. The players at the time seemed to like it a lot. I've often thought about doing it again, taking other literatures and somewhat turning them on their ear and see how they can be flexible in different directions.
Okay. So this is not a flex, but this is book 1 of Stormlight Archive. It's 2 volumes.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, heavy bastard. I bought the leather bound edition, and then this is books 3 and 4. I don't have a physical copy of book 2, but yeah, these things are massive monsters.
Yeah.
Book 4 is 1,242 pages.
Yeah. Colonel. Yeah. Peter Pan meets True Detectives. It was basically the feel for it. Yeah. My ex-wife asked me what was wrong with me.
So, I have to say, like, for me, when I last played Chrono Trigger, the thing that stuck with me the most was the prehistory age, the 12,000 BC time space within that game. And that's kind of where I'm at with my prehistory game. Is I'm kind of telling a story, like the very first origin story of the game world that I've been running for the last 20 some odd years. And I've always wondered, like, what about, we know what happens during the modern eras, the sword and sorcery eras, the Steam era, because those games have been played. I have the notes for those games somewhere. And having played all of those other games and explored the current time era so thoroughly, and having all the stories that led up to that point just be narration, I'm like, you know what? Let's take the narration out of it. Let's actually play what happened in the distant past. Now, I'm not going to say, that the game, even though I'm rewinding the way back machine to the prehistoric era, I'm not saying that everything that has happened up to the modern era is set in stone. what I'm saying is that the new players who play in that new game space, in that prehistory era, are going to be able to experience and do things that I will write into future campaigns when I revisit the modern era. So anything that happens, like this is basically, if you think about the Wheel of Time, everything happens in cycles. Everything that has been before and will be again. And this is just another turning of the wheel. This is another cycling of the planet and of my game world. So I'm going to be, like I said, resetting the timeline, and everything that the players, whenever I finally run this game, everything that the players will do will set things into motion into future games. So when my modern era, when I finally start running more modern era games again, anything that my players did will still be there more than likely, even 12,000 years later, especially if they built stone monuments or, giant underground labyrinths or whatnot, minotaurs and so on and so forth. So if they can't defeat a monster and they're like, you know what, let's put this monster into stasis because we have magic to do so, and we'll make it a future us problem or a future generation problem that we'll never meet. Okay, I'm going to notate that, and I'm going to mark down on my game map where it is, so that when I tell the story that happens 2, 3, 4,000 years into the future, if it's still there, still in stasis, I can use that for my game. And this all spawned from the idea that in Chrono Trigger, you travel through time, and your actions in the past have some bearing on what the future is like. Now, it is within a limited space or limited scope. Like, you can't just change anything. But what they really played with was the idea that if you were to visit one of these special boxes and empower it in the past, when you came back to the box, 400 years in the future, whatever was in the box would be powered up to its next version, its next most powerful state. And then you could take it from that current timeline, go back in time, take the original, the unmodified one, and the concept there was that you would go put it back in its rightful place to be powered up. And I'm like, that's a really cool concept. I want to run with it. But I don't have the ability to tell that story in one campaign. I want to be able to tell it over the course of 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 8 campaigns into the future. Like, whatever my players do in the far past, I want to use in future games. So that's where my mind was at when I last played Chrono Trigger.
I am free on Tuesdays.
I
am not.
I don't think I am, no. I've got such a busy schedule.
I'm just saying, I'm free on shit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've done Time War, and that campaign didn't last very long because my players got a headache because they couldn't keep things straight. Then that was my fault. Yeah, it's in different eras, kind of like a sliders thing. So
time travel is a toughie. Don't beat yourself.
It is.
Up.
Well, and we had this conversation. Actually, Conall led this conversation back in October about time travel, and it is one of my most favorite concepts to toy with, especially in a game setting. And that's because there's so much that media has already done that we can replicate, and there's ideas that people haven't really ever put to media. Like, there's only theories about it, especially like when you run across M theory or some of the scientific theories about time travel, like if it's even possible, what would it be like kind of scenarios. So That's just, again, that's where my head's at. That's where I theory craft my games, is time travel. So transdimensional. Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going there. Yeah.
And then
That was my first Turtles book. I still have it.
Man, speaking of
Wasn't Turtles 3 Turtles in Time?
that movie is horrible. That movie is just trash. I mean, I have a high tolerance for movies. I think there's only been like one, maybe two movies I walked out of, and you were with me on one of them.
Yeah.
Fucking Meet the Spartans. What a piece of load. Anyways,
What a waste
but
of 35 millimeter.
oh my god. Rather put it this way. I'd rather go watch the Barbie movie than sit down through that fucking movie again.
Noted.
With
Wow.
that being, yeah. And I have a high tolerance when it comes to movies. I'm fairly forgiving. And that movie was just nope. But speaking of sparks and whatnot, going back to Ninja Turtles, right? I love Ninja Turtles cartoons. I grew up on the 90s version of them. If that's the case, can we make the bastard skip? But Ninja Turtles comic books were a whole lot different than the movies or the cartoon series. And I think if I got gaming at, let's say, the same age you guys were gaming when you guys started gaming at, because there for a while, Ninja Turtles really was my jam. I think I would have found a way to run Ninja Turtles, not from the cartoons, not from the movies, but oh my God, from the comic books, which were bloody, violent. Depends on what. I mean, they just killed off all but one of them here recently in a comic book. The Last Ronin, where Michelangelo is the only turtle still alive.
Okay.
So it'd be a very interesting game to run. But like I said, I got started on the classics: Frankenstein, Dracula, Peter Pan, stories about a certain witch that we will not be named. For reasons that if you can't figure it out, that's your own damn problem.
Does it have something to do with December, I wonder?
Yeah. Man, I still, every once in a while, still have those childish nightmares about that lovely old grandma-like lady.
I think you might have spoiled something for Max there. He hasn't finished reading the comics yet.
It's been out for a year there.
That doesn't mean he's had time to read it.
No, I didn't spoil it. You find out about that in the very beginning of the comic book, so that's not my problem. Stop being responsible. Goof off for a while. Read a comic book. So, okay. So, as a young adult, as a kid, do you remember watching the Alex Baldwin's The Shadow?
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, I don't.
Yep. I've seen it a couple of times. I've got it in my collection on VHS, but no VHS player. But I'll probably just stick with the paperbacks or
it's not a great movie.
radio.
I mean, it's great for what it was, but it wasn't a great movie.
Right. Because of that movie, I can't watch Tim Curry ever again.
Oh, really? That's what burned you on Tim Curry?
Well, yeah. Yeah, he was just a greasy, slimy, just creepy bastard.
I think that's what got him his roles.
I mean, if
he used to be a rock star. Can you believe that?
Man, no. It was Rocky, the
No.
movie, not with Sylvester Stallone, but the other movie that killed that actor from acting. Nope, I'm good.
No, before Rocky Horror Picture Show, he was quite famous as a musician.
Oh, he's highly intelligent.
Really?
I mean, Tim Curry is creepy. It, the TV show, It, the miniseries. Anyways, turning it into a D&D campaign.
Kids on bikes.
Yep.
Kids on bikes. I have
do
to look into that one.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to go Harry Potter, kids on broomsticks.
Actually, that one has not actually. My daughter loves the Harry Potter novels, but she's not asked me to run anything other than buy the game that came out, Hogwarts Legacy. Has not had any interest in any RPG. Although she is greatly amused that her daddy's writing a one-shot module about cocaine owlbears.
Oh, of course.
Have you seen the new Archon Studios owlbear miniature from Dungeons and Blazers?
Sexy. So sexy. In the purple worm.
Yeah. I got it all coming in stereo, baby. I backed that Kickstarter twice under 2 different accounts so I can get extra goodies.
I just didn't have the money. I just
the dragon turtle. The dragon turtle looks epic. The airship looks epic. The Kickstarter just ended today, and I was talking with them online.
Before we get too far off topic, let's go ahead and close out the night. Unless chat has questions about Creative Origin, of which I'd be more than happy to answer.
Creative Origin wouldn't be complete without a little miniature talk.
Okay.
I got my love for miniatures thanks to my old man painting, World War II minis, and it's surprising that I don't do any historical miniature games, but the whole hobby of miniatures is actually, for some people, not everybody, has really added so much to the games for people who really like the tactile feel and the visualization aspect. Sure, a lot of people are still using the dry erase boards, but with companies like Archon and Dwarven Forge and things like that, along with all the other crafters out there, it has come a long way from railroad modeling to full castles and war zones and dungeons. It's I still look back on the days of the original 25 millimeter lead toxic miniatures. They're in my collection. Every time I do some spring cleaning, like right now, I come across that stuff, and it takes me back to an era where it was just starting, as well as the role-playing hobby. They went hand in hand for so many people, and to the point where there are literally millions of people out there who would not even dream of playing an RPG without the right plastic on the table.
It wasn't so much the DM that got me involved in my first campaign, realistically. I mean, yeah, it was interesting, but it was when he pulled out the miniatures of the monsters, the dragons, and the people. That's my ADD brain is what hooked on to. I'm like, those are really cool. And I do what with them? Oh, I tell a story, but with physical representation of what I'm fighting, it being a dragon or a zombie or a bear holding an axe, I think is one of them. But anyways, yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes getting people to sit down as one of the main is, at least I would say half of the freaking fight. But if you can find something that grabs their interest other than the actual RPG, but maybe other than the story, but maybe having a physical representative of what the dragon looks like, what the big bad looks like, what you look like, is definitely another tool for sparking ideas of future campaigns. Picking up a fig, I'll just grab this one. Grabbing a green dragon. I think this one. Yeah, this is a green dragon. And how can I run a module? Not a module. How can I write, a couple sessions where this guy's involved? what is he about? What is his MO? Is he attacking a village, a town, a church, and so forth and so on? Okay, I got that hammered out. Does he have any henchmen, kobolds, or goblins, or whatever? Just taking it from one small idea, as with as Travis said, with minis, and having it branch out from there. That could be it's its own tool for writing a campaign. If it's done and not even done right, if your brain works that direction.
I can see that. For me, it wasn't so much the minis that pulled me into the table. It was definitely the stories that were being told, and the how and what you could do with your characters. Like that to me is what really drew me in, rather than minis. Now, that's not to say that we didn't have minis, because I think the first few games that the game masters and even my buddy Reese had, we actually used Legos as our minis. We'd worked out that a 3x3 peg block was 1 inch in square. And so that's what we used as minis, was Legos, because they were completely customizable to what we wanted. We had like all of the different armors. We had the the different hats and all sorts of things. So we did have miniatures, but to me, again, it wasn't what truly drew me in to the game. It was more about the stories, and the characters.
I actually used Legos quite a bit, but for the some of the miniature war games I played that were science fiction oriented at the time, the sort of sci-fi Legos were like a new thing, with radar dishes and domes and all that. It made it so that we could make terrain, and make use of our old Lego collections as kids, bring them onto the battlefield. I've even actually seen Warhammer 40K games played entirely with Legos, tanks and all, with people built using all the parts and pieces that that were more or less commonly available to build all that stuff, even using the little Lego minifigs as Space Marines. It's hysterical, but at the same time genius, because you could just literally build your army. Whatever it takes. And yeah, Max,
on a budget, even.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, less so now, but I agree, Max. Honestly, with all the minis and things that I own, 99% of all the games I run are theater of the mind, rarely even using a dry erase board. But for some people and some occasions, it is really fun to bring out those tools, to bring out the terrain and the minis and all that other crap when you're going to have people there, and you just want to have a little bit different sort of feel to the game. But for the most part, theater of the mind.
Yeah, I'm the same.
That's
I think that's actually what's really awesome about the hobby in general is, you have your theater of the mind players, you've got your minis players, and each one of them, each type of player has a different perspective on how they get into the game and what draws them into it. For me, like, I've got a very, very vivid imagination, so I can dream up a landscape in my mind from just minimal descriptions. Like, I have in my mind's eye like what Treebeard looks like just from Tolkien's descriptions of him. Granted, it didn't match what Peter Jackson did in the film, but that's fine. Different imaginations, different lenses of the eye, so to say. But for you, Conall, like, as you said, that's what drew you in, was having us have miniatures on a battle grid and tactical movement and tactical combat. I've known a lot of, like, I myself am a very tactical combat minded person when it comes to D&D. Like, I know exactly like where I need to move to get cover, to gain the cover bonus and still be able to affect in combat, running 3-5. but I'm starting to become less concerned about battle maps and such, and more concerned about what is cool in the scene. Like, how can I use the scenery to my advantage? How can I, gain an advantage over my enemy by just what is in my environment? Not necessarily tactical combat, but just theater of the mind combat. So it's really cool to have the multiple ways of people getting into the hobby.
As long as people play. I mean, at the end of the day, I really don't care how you play as long as you play, and pass it on to people that you think would like to play. I never thought as a teenager I would have any interest in this hobby. My interests were in more physical sports. Never been much of a team player, but I had my sports I enjoyed. With that being said, it was my first DM wasn't the benchmark. Let's put it that way. It wasn't until I got into your campaign, you started DMing, that it was more than just something I did while my middle brother was in classes. I was just there to kill a few hours, and I kind of got into playing the Tiefling there for a while. The Tiefling was fun. God, that guy, that DM was rough on that DM. Just Anyways, but with the figs, I just like figs. I like something I can look at, something I can hold. I can look away from the table and for a half a second because my ADD kicked off and snap back. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what we're doing. I don't care about what's the angle for a fireball. If it hits me, it hits me. That it wasn't measuring out how far something can go. It was the physical representation of this is what my character is doing. It was an anchor, and that meant more to me than how far can you shoot an arrow, or if you cast a spell, how big is the splash range. I don't. That's between the DM and the book. That's not as a player. That's not where I'm at. Granted, I am also the guy who plays a wizard with rogue level, so I can cast fireball on myself and kill everybody around me. Why,
Yeah.
That's some dirty pool. It depends on how you look at it.
And then Max says, play a game with more abstract rules, like your Zero engine. And minis do their job wonderfully. War games like D&D and Pathfinder, well, Sean is right. Yeah. Okay. So, I think that kind of wraps the topic of creative origin, and I would like to leave everyone with this these words. You might be wondering, why are we discussing this? Why is creative origin important, especially in the gaming hobby? We often hear that all the stories have been told, that there is nothing original, and while true, we still tell stories, we still play games that have their origins in other places, for enjoyment and for entertainment. So I leave this in closing with: celebrate your creative origin. Go back and rediscover it. Maybe with new perspectives, not necessarily the perspective that you had when you first enjoyed it, but with a new perspective of, what can I glean from this? Like, what about this speaks to me? And then, share it with your friends in creative ways, spawn new games off of it, new characters even. And like I said, go back and re-enjoy it and rediscover it in a new light. In essence, this is the return home at the end of a hero's journey, and it's the beginning of a new journey. So yeah, that's what tonight has been about, is discovering what it is that drew you in, and finding that joy again, and rediscovering what brought you in. So, anyone have anything going on this week? I'm going to start with you, Shadow. What do you got going this week?
We are supposed to be doing a craft video tomorrow night. If everything works out and we can actually get the materials prepared in time. Otherwise, I will. Yeah. Otherwise, I will be doing two last Western game/game supplement reviews before the end of the month, where we will then, in May, pick up a new monthly topic. And I will be in a couple of games this weekend, starting Friday with Bo's GURPS game, followed up by Sunday's Traveler game with Rick from 28mm RPG. If you have not checked out his videos and his style of live play, I highly recommend it, not just because I'm in it and you get to see me again, but he's one of the best game masters out there on the interwebs and out there in TV land. Go give it a shot. They're only an hour and a half. They're free, and you might learn something, as he always says. I'm truly blessed to get to be in yet another great online gaming campaign. So I consider. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, personal favor, if you went over there and checked out his videos, give him some subs. He really should be doing a lot better numerically than the algorithm is allowing, but he'll get there, and hopefully you guys will, enjoy what you see, and feel free to give me a hard time for my character, because, well, why not, right?
Because we're us and you're you. Okay, Conall, what do you got going this week?
This week, today is Wednesday. Tomorrow on Table Breakers, hopefully we'll be doing the second part of Kai's steampunk meets Kai's brain style campaigning and enjoying the ever living hell out of it. Then this Friday, I don't know. Then this Saturday, you will be, if you wish, you can join me, Bruce, and a bunch of other lug nuts doing his campaign, as I'm sure he's trying to kill us with something big, bad, and smelly. Then on Sunday, don't worry, I didn't forget about you, Shadow. I want to wish Shadow a happy birthday. He's yet to tell me what day is his birthday. So every time I catch him on stream,
sometime this month,
I will say happy birthday. But because this is his birthday month, we are doing a Western theme. Last week we did Blazing Saddles. At least no one in the panel was Irish. Oh, wait, they were. That's besides the point. This coming week, we are doing the Kevin Costner's 1994 Wider. It's a serious movie, but those bastards make me sit through 3 hours of good old Chucky Boy. So I figured I'd return the favor with a good Western about the hero gunslingers that we all should want to play like if we play gunslingers. Me personally, I like a good Doc Holliday, but that's just me. And that's what I have going on Sunday. And if you can't check us out this coming Sunday, the next week, I believe we're doing Magnificent Seven, not the remake, but the original one. And it will be damn worth watching. And that's what I have to say about what I got going on this weekend.
Okay. So you heard it from Conall. Tomorrow on Table Rakers, we'll be completing part 2 of Kai's steampunk Western style game. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fairly interesting. I think we're going to have I think we have a coup guy here who's going to ensure that the president doesn't survive his harrowing ordeal. But good, bad. I'm just the guy with the gun. So I want to thank you all for being with us this evening. And if you haven't considered it yet, or have not done it yet, please consider subscribing to myself and the two panelists here, Shadow and Conall, because it'll help them out, and it'll tell us that you are actually interested in what we have to say. If you'd like to, and have not already, joined our Discord and would like to pose questions or, just chat with us or the other members of the Discord, our link to the Discord is in the description below. And with that, I bid you all a very good evening, and we'll see you next time. And that is going to be us out of here. So, that and have a great night, everyone.
Go smoke a cigar.
Live life. Enjoy your creative origin.